God bless you. Glad to have you come back, be with us in our Growing in Grace podcast. And I'm so glad today to have a special guest with us, Krystin Johnson. And today we want to talk about her story of losing her best friend. Losing her best friend. I often say that my wife is my best friend, and I say that husbands and wives actually should be best friends to each other.
Yes.
And if you have a spouse and you're not best friends to each other, then you got something to work on. And you feel like Mr. Omar Johnson was your best friend.
Yes.
And tell us about your marriage and your early marriage and your experience.
Well, we met in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like him in high school.
Okay, sounds like this is going to be good.
I thought he was arrogant and cocky,
Uh-huh.
and he was the homecoming king. He played baseball.
He was the man.
Yeah,
Okay.
and every time he would try to talk to me, I would be like, no, thank you. So we graduated. I still didn't. He would still try to keep in touch, and I would just ignore. And one day he reached out to me on Facebook, and he was like, "Are you going to a homecoming game?" And I said, "Yes, I'll be there." And he said, "Well, I'm glad I'm going to see you there." And I instantly got annoyed. Like, why would you still try to talk to me after all this time? And, but something was different that time we interacted. He wasn't the same, like, arrogant, cocky person that I'd known in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to talk. We created a friendship. We would talk all the time, back and forth, back and forth. And we would stay up late talking.
Mm-hmm.
In the morning, when after like 2 hours of sleep, when we would get up on my way to work, we'd be talking. And that just generated a great friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And I got robbed one day.
Mm.
And he drove from Augusta
Mm-hmm.
to Atlanta to see me, make sure I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it changed. And so we became more than friends, and then we just dated and talked, and we got married. And I thought that was forever.
Uh-huh.
And when he would always tell me, "Well, I want you to be the best person that you could be.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want to do that." And it still didn't, to me, I'm like, I'm doing what I want to do. I was working in hotels at the time, working for Marriott Corporate. So I was like, I'm doing what I want to do. And he was like, you come home and don't seem like that's what you want to do.
You don't seem happy.
No,
huh?
you don't seem happy. And so he told me, he said, I want you to quit your job. And to me, that was a no.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I want you to quit your job. And I remember telling my mom, I'm not quitting my job. I need my job. What if this happens, or what if that happens? And she told me, she said, if you trust him, you should do what he's asking you to do. He may have a bigger plan for your family than you know. And I quit my job, and he said, well, go back to school. Whatever you want to go to school for, go back to school. And I said, okay. So I went to school for early childhood education. And I got my associates, and he said, "Well, go back. You don't really have anything else. I don't want you to work. I want you to just take care of Kennedy and go back to school."
Mm-hmm.
And so I started getting my bachelor's, and he passed away in the midst of me getting. I was like a semester and a half shy of getting my degree.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away, and that day he passed away, I was in Texas. I was at a conference for missing and exploited children.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Kennedy calling me. It was like 9:30 in the morning. And I said, your dad let you stay home from school? And she said, Daddy's still asleep. He's sleeping. I instantly knew something was wrong, because he's a person that wakes up, whether he has to go to work or whether he's off that day. He wakes up 6:30 like nobody's business. And I said, he's still sleeping? She said, yeah, he's still sleeping. I said, have you tried to wake him up? And she said, no, I figured, she was just like, no, he's asleep. So I said, can you do me a favor? Can you try to wake him up? And I hear her on the phone trying to wake him up, and he's not waking up. So I said, Kennedy, take daddy's phone and go in your room. And I said, I'm going to call you right back. And I called his best friend, who stayed literally down the street from where we stayed. And I said, can you go to my house like right now? And I think Omar passed away. I felt it in I just felt it. I said, I think Omar passed away. He's like, oh no, he's probably just tired. He worked both of his jobs yesterday and he went to church last night. He said, he's probably just tired. And I said, no, I feel like something's wrong. I know him. He wakes up at 6:30. It doesn't matter if he worked 3 jobs. He's going to wake up at 6:30. And I called Ken, and when I hung up with him, I called Kennedy back. I said, hey, Uncle Pope is going to come. And when he comes, I'm going to call you back, and I'm going to tell you unlock the door. And she did that. And when he got there, he had me on the phone. I don't think he knew he had me. He was trying to resuscitate him. But I could hear it through the phone. And I hung up, and I immediately called my mom. And I'm just like losing it because I'm not home. And nobody's home with my baby. And I remember in that hotel room, I started praying. And I said, this is the journey that you have for me. But I need you to explain it to me. I need you to reveal whatever it is to me of why you took my friend. And I just surrendered. At that very moment, I surrendered. And I got on the plane and I came home. And I remember my mom was like, are we going to stay in a hotel tonight? And I said, no, I'm staying home. And she said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm staying home. And I started to move forward. And she would just be like, are you okay? Because I know on the outside looking in, it could look like I didn't grieve or I wasn't grieving. And she said, well, I'm not going to go back home right now. I'm going to stay. She was living in Tennessee. And she was like, I'm not going to go back home right now. I'm just going to stay. And I relied on the sources he left here for me. He has some great friends, really great friends that just stepped in for me. They pretty much planned the funeral, would check on me every day. Hey, do you need to get out the house? I'm gonna come over there so I can get you out the house. He just left a solid village for me, and I realized that was based off of his character. Because I say this often, he brought me to Christ. And I know that sounds crazy because I grew up here.
Right.
I grew up in the church. My mom brought me to church. We came Monday, Thursday, Sunday. We were here. But he brought me to Christ. He grew up, he didn't go to church growing up. And his parents were divorced when he was like 3 or 4 years old. So he didn't know the family that I knew or what I knew family was supposed to be or what your journey in Christ was supposed to be. He didn't have that. But he was confident in knowing God. And his character attested to that. And some things that I would say, he was like, you shouldn't say that. And how
he was correcting you.
Yes. You shouldn't say that. And I'm like, well, they're not doing this for you. Why are you doing that for them? And he would say, it's not about what they do for me. It's about what I'm supposed to do for people. So when he started coming to church, he took it seriously. And I was still kind of like, okay, I'm coming.
Kind of lackadaisically.
Yeah, I'm coming, but I'm not as faithful as he was. Because even when I went out of town, he went to church that night without me.
Yeah.
And he showed me what true, honest love was. He always had a smile. He always greeted people well. If he could do anything for you, he would do it. And so the village that he left me they did those things, I don't believe on my merit,
Mm-hmm.
but they did it based on who he was to them and how he treated them. And that made me start to look at life and God differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe that in that surrendering to God, in that process, after my husband passed, I believe that he unveiled some things to me
Mm-hmm.
that I needed, that I needed to know about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that if my husband was still here, I would still be just dependent on him.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was my source,
Mm-hmm.
he was my source. So when he passed, I think that was God telling me that I need to be
Yes,
your source.
Mm-hmm.
He was my source of love.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was the only person that loved me besides my mom unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to do anything for it in return. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was there.
It was just there. Mm-hmm.
Um, and because I grew up with a lot of siblings
Mm-hmm.
and I had to always do for
Mm-hmm.
others, it was nice to not have to do anything
Mm-hmm.
in return for somebody's love and affection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think his passing was God just saying, I have to be your source.
Mm-hmm.
The love that you get from him, that was great,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm the love that you need.
Mm-hmm.
I'm that source. And so my faith started to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the love that I have for people and the things that I'm willing to do, that started to grow. And I don't think that would have been so had my husband still been here.
Wow, you've given a great perspective. You know, a lot of people may not look into their pain and their suffering to find the good. When truly, if you love God, the scripture says that all things.
Yeah.
It didn't say some things. And I think sometimes people try to mitigate that or lessen that and say, well, this, maybe that, maybe not this or that.
Right.
But the scripture says in Romans 8 and about 28, all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. And if you are a child of God, even things that hurt,
Yes.
it has some good in it. And to lose your best friend had to hurt.
Yes.
But in suffering, there is an opportunity for growth and development. And it's amazing that you said that even the night or the day that you knew that before you even was confirmed,
Yes.
you had a knowing.
Yeah.
But you were seeking an understanding. It sounds like you wasn't really angry with God, but you wanted an understanding from God.
Yes.
Is that true?
I wasn't angry.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't angry.
Mm-hmm.
I was more, as the months passed, I was more understanding to and happy
Mm-hmm.
that number one, I was obedient to my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Because had I not went back to school
Mm-hmm.
and did the things that he asked of me, I probably would have been in a bad position
I see.
financially.
Uh-huh.
Because I hadn't worked.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't worked in about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't worked. And to jump back into hotels, they're going to ask, what's this gap that you have? Well, why haven't you been? And then things progress fast in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would have been hard for me to get a job there. And had I not been obedient to what he wanted me to do, I wouldn't have had that degree. And I wouldn't have been getting my other one.
Yes.
And so even in his passing, my mom was like, well, just take a semester off. I said, no, I have to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, but that assisted me in being able to get a career, in the field that I got my degree in. And so I was just looking for an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really I wasn't angry.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know why.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my prayer a lot of times. Why? We weren't married that long. I think we were married 4 years. Um, I'd known him a long time, but we hadn't been married a long time. And so I just wanted to know why. And I wanted God to, show me why. And the more I looked for an answer, the more he started to show me myself.
Yes.
Right. He started to show me myself. You were looking and leaning on him. And I was supposed to be looking and leaning on God.
Wow.
And even in my marriage, I felt like I was a great wife. But in some things, he showed me you got a smart mouth. You might not want to get that together. Your attitude could be better. And that helps me now with my daughter. I can kind of be like, don't say that.
Because you see yourself.
Yes.
so you're actually correcting some things that were in you.
Yes.
And you're kind of editing them out of your daughter.
Yes. Because his friends be like, well, Krystin, you a little rough. And I'm like, me? I'm rough? And they're like, yeah, you kind of come off a little rough. So I had to, but they probably would have never told me that if Omar was still here, because they were going to respect his wife. So, but they probably would have never told me that. But it's some things that I was learning about myself in my grieving process. But I think that was only because I surrendered to the fact that he was gone, and that it was the will of God that he was gone. And I just wanted him to show me in this process, how can I be a better person, and what are you trying to show me about me? And I've learned a lot of, and I'm still learning things, but I've learned a lot of things about myself. I've learned that it's okay to be emotional. My mother is my mother.
Yes.
And she's a very strong woman.
Yes.
And I remember when my dad passed, I didn't see her cry. I believe at the funeral I saw one tear, and she wiped that tear, and I didn't see her cry again. And that, for me, I'm like, well, we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be strong people.
Don't cry.
It happened. Get up, dust yourself off, and move on. And in this process, I've learned it's okay. If you feel it, feel it. If you need to cry, cry. And so there's times in front of my daughter, which my mom would have never done. In front of my daughter, if a song come on, and I'm like, oh, that song reminds me of your dad, or he likes that song, I cry. And I do that in front of her to let her know that you can still be strong and have those different feelings and emotions.
That's right.
And so I've learned a lot in this process.
It's okay to cry. I even sometimes when we have services for saints, the homegoing services, we try to let people know, hey, if you want to cry, that's fine. We can cry, we can be sad, but not like people who don't have any hope.
Right.
So we can also laugh about memories. We can remember good, funny things that that our friends did and our loved ones did, and laugh.
Right.
And that's appropriate too, because that was a part of their life, laughter, joy. And so we can also have joy as well, recognizing that one thing about us is that we don't really die.
Right.
We don't really die. We go to sleep.
Right.
We go to sleep. And then there's going to come a day when God is going to raise us to everlasting life and a new body that doesn't have the the confinement and the problems that these have. These don't have no diabetes and no blood pressure issues and all that stuff. We got this long list of problems, arthritis and all this stuff. And so there is something to be joyous about. The big sad thing is that we lose those opportunities to have further opportunities to laugh and with them in this side of life.
Right.
And so that's really the sorrow part. But we don't sorrow like other people.
No.
But it is okay to cry, and and as I say sometimes in those services is that really there's going to come a day when God is going to wipe away all our tears.
Right.
And the thing I think about it is because the scripture says no more crying. And it's not a situation where he's going to just, you're going to be wanting to cry and he's just going to have your tears where they can't come, you know.
Right.
But the reasons for crying are going to be gone.
Right.
All the reasons for crying is going to, no more pain, no more death, no more sorrow. The former things, they're done away. And he's making all things new.
Right.
And so you have these things to look forward to. And I can see from your conversation, then I also know you from a long time. Yes. And like your friends told you, you were rough. I mean, you're
yeah.
to the point. It's like
Yes.
boom, boom, boom. Your speech
Yes.
was very sharp. And you cut somebody up with that, with your tongue.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but you have toned it down. You've toned it down. In fact, you didn't even have to tell me that. I've witnessed you. I've seen your growth and your development, and it's just amazing how God works with us.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I do, and it's amazing what He works with us through.
Yes.
I never understood how people say they have joy in the midst.
Yeah.
But I understand that now.
Yes.
And even in small situations, big situations, I understand how you can have joy because you know that there's a better day coming.
Yes.
And so I understand now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand it a while back, but I understand now
Mm-hmm.
how even when things aren't going your way,
Mm-hmm.
or things happen that you never thought would happen, that you can still find joy
Mm-hmm.
and peace
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of a lot of confusion.
Yes. Yes.
And because that road wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
His family didn't make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
And me being still, I would consider a newlywed.
Yeah.
And losing my husband, and then having the friends we had, and they were still married. And I'm like, well, can I still hang out with these people? Can I still be around them?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a lot. The road wasn't easy,
Mm-hmm.
but I decided to surrender.
Mm-hmm.
I just decided, okay, if we're friends and if they want to hang out with me, then we'll hang out. I didn't try to make everything a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I just walked the walk.
Mm-hmm.
And as things happened, I'm like, okay, Lord, just show me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Show me what to do. Show me the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now what's the next step? And I tried to stay humble in that,
Mm-hmm.
in that walk of grief. And it's not over. I'm still dealing with some things, but I try to walk according to how He tells me to walk.
Interesting. So, before your husband, your best friend, before he left, he gave you some instructions,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't want to follow
Right.
those instructions, and your mom brought it to your attention that he's your husband. Trust him.
Right.
If you trust him, to do what he said.
Right.
And you took that, and you said, okay, I don't see this. Okay, but I quit.
Some people give a 2 weeks notice. I gave like a month notice.
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
I really don't want to do this, but maybe if I can talk him into letting me stay.
Yeah, maybe I can reverse it.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, I did. I gave him a month notice, and I said, well, okay, I'm gonna do what he asked me to do, but it came out for my benefit.
Yes. And then he said, go to school. You did that.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to school. You did that. And really your obedience in that regard set you up for life, going forward.
Yes.
And then you found out that you were relying heavily upon your husband, but not enough upon God.
Right.
And I would even say this, and I'll come back to the point that I'm trying to make, but I would say this, this is somewhat of a digression, but I would say to married couples that really God is actually supposed to be number one.
Yes.
God is supposed to be above your husband, above your wife, above your kids, above your jobs.
Yes.
He actually is a jealous God. And he said, thou shalt have no other God before me. He should be number one in all of our lives.
Right.
But back to the point, though, is that, but through the relationship with your best friend, your husband, you were trusting him and relying on him and became obedient to what he told you.
Yeah.
And now you are relying on God and becoming obedient to what God says.
Yes.
Which in time past, that was not so much.
Right.
But now it's becoming the number one priority for you is to seek counsel from God. Lord, what would you have me to do? What should I learn from this? What direction should I go in? And ultimately, that's a good place to be in, whether you have your husband, your spouse, or not.
Right.
And I'm saying that to say that there may be somebody that's with their spouse, but really we still should be saying, Lord, what would you have me to do? What would you have me to do?
Yeah.
You know.
And there's a lot of benefit in, I just think back on when I was married, and I'm like, man, I don't have anything to do.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to stay home? I just got one child.
Mm-hmm.
This is boring. But that was a restful period for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had worked since I was like 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I've helped my mom take care of my brothers and sisters. That was a restful period for me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm able to do things for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to serve here at the church. I'm able
Mm-hmm.
to work. I'm able to take care of my daughter. But I may not have been able to do all of those things if I were married.
Mm-hmm.
Because the priority would be my household. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
priority is there now, but I'm able to do a lot more things. But I think that was because I had that rest period. I was able to rest. I don't feel, I'm sure by now I would feel drained if I had worked all that time and then had to probably ramp up even more since my husband was gone. I didn't have that. He passed away in September of 2017, and I didn't go to work until January. My mom kept saying, "What you? Don't you think you need to be looking for a job? Aren't you gonna?" And I said, "Well, I just want to take my time." And she kept saying, "Well, what about your bills?" And I said, "Well, I'm okay." I had a lot of people to. This is a funny story to me, but it wasn't funny to other people when I told it. So he left a job. He left his job and went to another job. And you had to be on the job 90 days for the life insurance to kick in. The day he passed was the 90th day.
Don't you see?
The 90th day. And we paid for the funeral, and I didn't have any money in my account. Like after that, I'm not gonna say any money, but not enough to carry on. And the guy from his job called and said they're probably gonna give you a hard time because he technically didn't work that day. That was the night he was supposed to come in that day, and that was the 90th day. And I laughed on the phone with the guy. I said, "Well, whatever God's will is, it'll be. If that money is mine, it'll be mine. If not, it's not mine." And the Chef Association called me and said, "Hey, fill out this paper and send it back to us." I filled out the paper. I sent it back. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I just thought because he was a chef who had won a lot of awards and did a lot of things that they just needed something to write up or whatever. And she called me. She said, "Hey, can you come to my office and pick up this check?" And I said, "Okay." I get to the office and it was a $20,000 check. They paid for the funeral and some. And she's like, well, because he was a part of the chef association, this is the money that he had. And then I didn't think about the life insurance policy. I was like, well, if it's mine, it'll eventually come.
Mm-hmm.
It was a whole year later
Mm-hmm.
before that money came, but I never wanted for it for anything.
Right.
I never had to like not worry about what my rent was coming from, where my bills are coming from. I never had to worry about any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It's God just covered me.
Yes.
And in the beginning, I would say Omar was just taking care of me.
Mm-hmm.
But now I can say God just
God
covered
was
me.
doing that. Yes.
He covered me.
Yes.
And He made it to where I could really just grieve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, He set me on a job where I worked there 6 weeks as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And she came and put me in the office and she said, I want to offer you a position of assistant director. And I said, okay, I'll take that position. And then she called me back and said, the same day, she said, can you just be the director here? And so I took that position, and it was just favor.
Mm-hmm.
It was just
Mm-hmm.
favor on top of favor on top
Mm-hmm.
of favor. Even now, I left that place and I went somewhere else, and that was that. Now that's favor because I'm less hours, more money,
Mm-hmm.
and so He's just covered me.
Mm-hmm.
He's just covered me, and I know that's because of the obedience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've been, and it sounds weird, but I've been blessed in this.
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed spiritually in
Mm-hmm.
this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes things that's painful can also, and things that make you uncomfortable can help you to grow.
Right.
And so certainly you've grown in grace and looking for some continued growth.
Yes.
And I do appreciate your service and how you serve. Yeah, I don't know if you could do all of that. The way that you serve with the dining and with the food and y'all be on it. But I do see the growth in you, and I'm just continuing to pray for you and your daughter Kennedy,
Yes.
and that you will continue to mature in Christ. And I appreciate you coming sharing your story with us. Is there anything you'd like to say in parting?
I would just say obedience is key.
Mm-hmm.
Even in relationships, in your marriage, and what God is telling you to do, obedience is key.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would say, timing. You're not doing what people will in your marriage or in parent-child relationship or in your relationship with God. Timing is key.
Mm-hmm.
So if I tell you to do something,
Mm-hmm.
it's not when you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's when it's supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And that has helped me as well. Because,
Mm-hmm.
God can tell you to do something,
Mm-hmm.
and then you lax about it. And that's not obedience.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do it, it's still not obedience because it's not when it's supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say obedience is key.
Yes, yes, yes. And I would agree that, when God tells you and you know what to do, you understand what to do, then that's the time to do it.
Yep.
And I appreciate our audience being here with us today, and I believe that you will receive some good nuggets from this conversation, and we invite you to come back to our next conversation in Growing in Grace. May the Lord bless you. May heaven smile upon you until next time. God bless you.